Afternoon, good evening to everyone. This is South Asia Democratic Forum conversation. We are dedicating uh, our today's event to gender apartheid in Afghanistan. The conversation will be animated by two speakers, two Afghan women. First, we will have Hasina Jalal. Hasina Jalal is the founding director of the National Association of Afghanistan Civil Society, and she co founded the first alliance of South Asian women on women's economic, social, and cultural rights. She has served in the government of Afghanistan as a minister, as an advisor, and as a director. She is now currently a PhD scholar in public and international affairs and a research associate at University of Pittsburgh, having been before in Georgetown University, being a fellow, and she is still an alumnus of the Fulbright program. She has a master's in women's and gender studies and another master's degree in business administration. Hasina is deeply concerned about the current situation in Afghanistan, and she is rooting for bringing back human rights and democracy to Afghanistan. She will be the first speaker, and she will give us a brief overlook of what were the measures taken by the Taliban, especially in recent months, regarding women, since the Taliban took over Kabul. Then we will have another lady from Afghanistan, Yalda Royan. She is a senior development professional and women's rights activist with extensive leadership experience in government, national, and international NGOs. She has spearheaded women's rights initiatives in Afghanistan through various United States aid funded projects where she sought to advance women's political, economic, and social participation. She had to be evacuated to the United States in August 2021 following the Kabul takeover by the Taliban. And she was working at the time as a consultant for World Bank in the public health sector, and currently she works at the Office of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Nova Community College. And also, she is a consultant to Voice Afghanistan program. She has vast expertise in designing and leading gender initiatives across women's empowerment, resolution, and peace and security, and holds a master's degree in gender and women's studies from Kabul University. And she will speak about the situation on the ground. How are these apartheid measures impacting Afghan women and how they are responding? After the initial interventions from them, we will have a period of conversation where uh, people from the outside will be very much welcome to intervene through written questions or comments that they can post through our Facebook or YouTube channels. And they will be provided to us and we will respond them. Um, so this is it. And without further delay, let me now give the floor to Hasina Jalal. Please, Hasina, thank you so much for accepting this invitation. And thank you so much for being with us. And please, the floor is yours. The sound is not there.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Paulo. Very much happy to be here discussing a very important topic, relevant and timely and needed to be discussed. So, as we all know, and we hear from the news and reports from Afghanistan, the situation, unfortunately, from the human rights perspective as well as humanitarian and economic perspective for women and minorities and girls is very, very bad. Since the takeover of Afghanistan by the current regime, they have committed serious and various violations of international human rights laws and humanitarian laws, and also including war crimes and other serious human rights violations and abuses, including abuse of impunity. We recently saw that they imposed dress restrictions on girls who go to schools, and there is also restrictions on the teachers. Most places in Afghanistan currently, schools are not allowed to go to girls are not allowed to go to secondary schools, and in some places such as Mazar-e Sharif, which is an exception where girls were able to go to school, there is various kinds of restrictions imposed on them. There is a teacher for the imposition of voice and virtue that regularly attends schools, and girls, they are reported that they're required to wear burqa, and they have to cover their faces, only their eyes showing, and if they don't do that, the teachers are fired and the girls are expelled from the schools. Teachers in most schools, they don't get the salaries, and if they do, they get partially. And again, these are all reports of Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch that have interviewed girls from the schools on the ground, and they bring this unfortunate news to us. Um, Other than that, we also see that there is not a enabling environment or a safe environment for the girls in the very limited schools that they are attending. They are constantly in fear that the Taliban representative or the teacher of vice and virtue will enter the school and check on their uniforms. In these reports, when I was looking at some of the testimonies of schoolgirls, it was one of the very unfortunate and almost funny rule that they have imposed on girls is that um, sometimes they tell them to wear loose sleeves because they don't want the shape of the arm to be shown. And in some other cases, when they wear loose sleeve and they are on the blackboard writing something, they again scold them for wearing a loose sleeve and tell them to wear a more fitted sleeve. So girls were saying that we are confused on what to wear, and of course, covering faces is another um, huge violation of both Afghan culture and human rights laws, and takes their freedom from the girls and from the teachers who teach there. So the other issues is that they have constantly tried to exclude women from the political, social, and economic spheres in Afghanistan. They have constantly tried to ban women judges and women who have worked in the security sector from going to their work, and also they have discouraged other women to enter their workplace. Sometimes they have accompanied them till their escorted them to their houses back, and um, overall, we can say that there is a restriction on women's work, freedom to work, and that comes with the woman issues with if women can earn a dignified life, and they cannot bring food to their table, or for especially for women who are the breadwinners for their family in Afghanistan, being a majority, a big number of female-headed households and widows. Of course, freedom of expression, speech, association, and assembly is taken away from all the Afghans, but especially from women. We saw this in the case of women protesters when they were detained and imprisoned and taken away. We also see discrimination based on gender, on women outside Afghanistan by the neighboring countries when they forcefully return the refugees and asylum seekers. Countries like Turkey, Iran, Pakistan reportedly are doing this, and this is in itself a huge challenge for women who are taking exile on those countries. We can. I think I will stop there, and because there is a lot of issues, and I can continue talking about different aspects, but I would love to again contribute when we have the questions. So thank you. For now, I'll stop.
Thank you, Hasina. It has been quite a telling picture, the one you did. Women rights are curtailed either on the political basic rights, the freedom of association, uh, the right to education, even the right to identity, not to mention the freedom of movements, and most importantly, even the right to earn a living, which is so important as we know, there are so many families in Afghanistan headed by women. So this is a terrible situation that I think we should not at all see as a normal situation, and that we should not see this as something that is compatible with the basic international standards. But to explain a bit better how things are being developed on the ground, how experiences and also ways that Afghan women are finding to fight against this situation, we will now have Yalda Royan. Please, Yalda, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Paulo and Hasina Jan, for giving a background of what's happening right now in Afghanistan. So I would be willing to speak about the women's movements and resistance in Afghanistan. A perception, actually a little wrong perception that exists among the international community is that the women's movement started after the fall of Taliban in 2001, and it was the international community who introduced it, which is not the fact. Afghanistan's women's movement started back in 1920s, and we had our first girls' school, first women's magazine, the first group of women who went out of Afghanistan for scholarships to get higher education. All of these movements started from 1920s, and yes, we have been facing ups and downs during this journey of women's movements, but the fact that this wasn't a new concept or a new phenomenon in Afghanistan, this is undeniable. In the last 20 years, as after the fall of Taliban in 2001, there was a lot of achievements or progress in terms of women's rights in different aspects, starting from their political participation to sports, to arts, to all other social inclusion or activities, which do not look very important for a lot of people in Afghanistan, but it showed that women had a lot of progress in every aspect. The leadership at the national level, at the local governance, everything was something that we were proud of and that we had worked together for. But unfortunately, after 15th of August 2021, when the Taliban took over, we kind of lost everything. When I'm saying everything, it means that it is not only about discrimination, it is about removing women totally from the social arena. As Hasina Jan said, from higher education, from school, from work, and from everywhere. But then a group of young women who were actually born during the last 20 years and who had grown up in the last 20 years and were introduced to all of the progress around the world, and they knew that to have a progressed country, it is very important that women are part of this development activities, and they had higher education. So they started to resist the restrictions that were put by the Taliban. The first protest started just like 1 month after the Taliban took over, and this continued for a while. And the main the main claim that these protesters had was work, education, and freedom, which is very basic human rights for any woman in any country, whether it is Islamic or non-Islamic. But then this resistance also didn't last long because of the atrocities that Taliban started to impose on them. They first started from gas tearing to kind of shooting in the air so that these protests can be dispersed, and the girls are afraid and they cannot get out of their homes or go for any demonstration or protest. And it got worse and worse in December, end of December, when the Taliban started abducting these girls. The first group who was abducted was in north of Afghanistan in Balkh. A group of 45 women were abducted by the Taliban, and they were kept under their custody for at least 45 days. And what these women went through during these 45 days is horrifying. From sexual abuse to physical torture to humiliation to whatever kind of injustice or violence that you could think of. After they were released, actually 9 of these girls disappeared from that custody, and nobody still knows where they are, whether they are alive or no. 9 of them were disappeared that way, and the rest of them who were arrested, 5 of them were killed by their family members because of the stigma that it could bring with itself to be in a prison by the Taliban. And the rest of these girls went through a very worst mental and psychological problems that is still they are facing. And very unfortunately, some of these women who were abducted at the first time and then they were planned to be evacuated, they were once again taken by the Taliban under custody back in February, I guess, and a video of them was released. I'm sure people has seen it, where they were forced to kind of confess that they were doing all these protests for money. They had taken money from international community and they were doing the protest, which is not the fact. Again, this abduction, the series of abductions did not stop, and 8 other leaders of these groups were abducted in different time, and they were again tortured. And the very disappointing fact at this time was that Taliban was denying having a hand in it. And with their denial, it was being difficult for a lot of us as advocates to raise our voice and to prove that they have been abducted by the Taliban. And again, very disappointedly, while the Taliban was given an international platform in Norway summit, um, this was exactly the same time when they had the woman under their custody being tortured, and they were speaking to the world, lying to the world, saying that they don't have a hand in it. And finally, until these girls were released, and the series is still ongoing. The impact of this atrocities or this forms of violence that Taliban had on the women's movement was that they are silenced right now, which is very disappointing. And this was one of the things that we were very worried about, and it was an alarming thing for us. And we kept calling on UNAMA and international community to provide security for these girls so that they can raise their voice. Otherwise, silencing them means normalizing what Taliban is doing. So there should be somebody who could speak against them or who could talk about what the women are going through. Anyways, this was the impact of what the Taliban did on women's movement and resistance, which is very disappointing. Some of these women are still inside Afghanistan. Their movement is being controlled. Their communication is being controlled by the Taliban. Even if this girl is leaving the house to visit a relative, the Taliban would knock on the door and say, "Where is the girl? She should come back home," which is the worst kind of restriction on a human, considering the basic human rights, which is in the International Human Rights Declaration. It has a definition. This is what is happening with the protesters in Afghanistan. Some of them have been evacuated, as I said, but there are some of them who are there. The voice is now silent totally, and a lot of other violence which is happening in Afghanistan, which is domestic violence. There is no protection or prevention mechanism for the women to be speaking about what they are going through, because with the fall of Taliban, every legal institution that included women or that addressed or responded to the problems of the women have been closed, starting from the Ministry of Women's Affairs to the Human Rights Commission to the local NGOs who were working to fight violence against women at domestic level. Everything has closed. And I think I would stop here, and this is what the reality that is happening right now in Afghanistan, which is very unfortunate. And the worst part is that the world is closing their eyes to what is happening to women in Afghanistan, and this is very painful. And after 20 years of investment in Afghanistan by a lot of the leading organizations on human rights, on women's rights, and on education, this is the outcome right now, and this is what you see. And this is not only a shame and embarrassment for us, but also for the international community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yalda, for this terrible picture of the situation in Afghanistan. It is, to me, it is absolutely impossible to believe in anyone that claims to defend women's rights and at the same time pretending that Afghanistan is not existing. It's not possible. It is a complete contradiction. And I was very much touched because I did not realize that both events went simultaneously. The same time that Taliban were kidnapping women, 9 disappeared, 5 were murdered by the family, as you said. Some of the others were imprisoned again, and some were forced to make false confessions. There was this Norway initiative. Well, everything is going okay, and we are going to normalize Afghanistan. I had not realized that this was simultaneous. And if I may, I would suggest that these confessions, they are very telling. And it is when you have all of the elements together. I think there is no way that the truth can be hidden. And so if the Taliban did not make it, well, but then the women confessed to them that they were the wrongdoers. So how comes that they did not do it? It's obviously impossible. And I think this should be put together in a picture, and all of the political leaders that were involved in this Norway process, they should be confronted. SADF is absolutely open right now to do whatever we can in our very limited capacity to help you to bring these people in the political leadership in the West to their responsibility, to their complicity in hiding the atrocious crimes against women that are being perpetrated by Taliban. We will be certainly, we will do whatever we can. And I think these people must respond. This cannot be done. This hypocrisy, it's absolutely unbearable. My dear ladies, I think that I was given the news that Dr. Siegfried Wolf, that is now in Brussels, I am in Portugal, he would like to make a comment on the present conversation. So, Dr. Siegfried Wolf, if you want to say something on the issue we are debating, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Paulo. I hope I'm audible and that you can hear me well.
Very good.
Yeah, and it's a great honor for me to have the opportunity to share one or 2 points. In particular, I wanted to raise some question, but rather than from a outside perspective, I'm thankful to you both speakers giving such deep insights, and it's really shocking what's going on in Afghanistan. I'm also very glad to hear about the women's movement starting already in 1920s. This was a really good point, and in particular, since you mentioned that the high level of misperception about the women movements and the situation of women in Afghanistan exists. Besides all the talks in the last 20 years about what the Western countries, international communities are doing for women in Afghanistan, is still surprising to me the tremendous lack of actual awareness about the significance of the situation of women and girls in Afghanistan. And we talked much now about the takeover of the Taliban of Kabul and the seizing power. Of course, this is without question the most important critical juncture for the situation of women in Afghanistan. But there's also one other important event we need to highlight, which marks a second setback, I think, for the situation of girls and women in Afghanistan, and this is the Russian war on Ukraine. And what I'm seeing here is which worsens the situation since this Russian invasion. We hear less and less of the situation in Afghanistan, and this is really shocking. How few medias are really reflecting on reporting on the situation in Afghanistan, and since then we can really see, at least from my perspective, how things are getting worse and how many draconian restrictions the Taliban, in particular since February, end of February, are starting to impose on women and girls in Afghanistan. In particular, the most important issue in the last months, which was partly reported, is the ban on secondary schools for girls, and which we can really see how Taliban are breaking all promises they made. Yeah? And being not covered by the international media, international observer, it seems that they're really starting to enforce and showing really the real face. When it comes to, and also the crackdown on all the remaining political personal freedoms, like freedom of press and speech, are worsening in the last weeks or like the last 3 months. And I think, in particular, when it comes back to this education of women and girls, particularly girls, of course, I think this has traumatic consequences when we consider the rapidly declining economic situation in Afghanistan, the poverty, the food scarcity, and when we recall, and I guess you will confirm this, how important are women and girls for the financial support of the families. And there are numerous cases in which families were only able to survive, literally survive, because the girls and women were educated and had the opportunity to move around in the public space and to earn money and to get food for the family. And this is in war wondering for me. What's wondering is that this doesn't get recognized really by the international community, which finds its expression that they don't care anymore about education in Afghanistan. And this brings me to several questions. My first question would be to both of you. What should be done from your perspective to increase the awareness on the importance of girls' education within the international community? What states can do, for example, in particular, like from my perspective from the European Union. My second question would be that we hear more and more reports about different perception amongst the Taliban regarding girls' education. I don't know how true it is, but at least there are some reports. And here it seems that there is some kind, I don't want to say rifts, but at least different approaches between some Taliban bureaucrats who be a bit more open to girls' education vis-a-vis the Taliban leadership. Do you see here somehow an opportunity, window of opportunity to improve the situation for girls? My third question is, there were also recently reports about clerics in Afghanistan, actually all over the country, and also from abroad, even including Pakistan, who are supporting girls' education. There's one interesting example. The name of the cleric is called Mufti Taqi Usmani. He's supposed to be one of the most influential religious scholars, and who argues that the school ban is fodder for anti-Islamic sentiments and that girls can be educated in certain segregated institutions. So, which brings me to the question, how do you see the role of so-called less radical clerics? Do they have any chance to get heard by the Taliban leadership? Can they perhaps start kind of change from within Afghanistan? And my fourth last question would be, considering the before mentioned promises of the Taliban so far, do you think that an offer to recognize Islamic Emirate would help to improve the situation of girls or women, or is this just would be just rhetoric and this is a hopeless exercise? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wolf. We have a lot of questions here in the comments. I think that You may consult them directly if you just press the button comments in your application. Alital, who is a Brazilian, or at least living in Brazil, migrated from Iran and very much against Islamic fanaticism, he is saying he is present. Good afternoon, Ali. Chris Blackburn, who is really the soul and the most important and big motor of the Global Friends of Afghanistan. He made several comments, and for the audience, I would like to read them before getting back to you. Chris, the first question is reading like this. The Taliban are trying to regress any form of development in Afghanistan. Why did the global community get it so wrong in believing that the Taliban had changed? I think that the question is for both of you, so you might take them on board in your reply, trying to get a comprehensive answer to all of the questions. And the second is, we heard about how women's rights in Doha, Qatar, had influenced Taliban leadership while they were living in exile. We heard how things would be different. Can we do anything to make them rethink, to make the Taliban rethink the issue all over? Well, a lot of questions. I don't know who wants to get in first. Hasina, perhaps, and Yalda afterwards, perhaps. Hasina, what are your comments on this?
Thank you so much for your comments, Dr. Siegfried, and Chris Blackburn from the Global Friends of Afghanistan. Very much appreciating your thoughtful comments and questions. I think these are all very good questions. I'll start with Dr. Siegfried, who posed 4 questions. So, firstly, to raise awareness about what's happening in Afghanistan regarding girls' education, I would suggest that the UNAMA, UN's mission on Afghanistan, and UN Special Reporter on Afghanistan should stand by the organizations that are advocating for girls' rights to education, and they are trying to establish homeschools or education centers or literacy centers in Afghanistan. I heard that IRC is active in this regard. There are some other local organizations that are led by women in exile and some locally. So it's very important that we continue to fund women's and girls' education in Afghanistan without discriminating based on gender and supporting these organizations. It's also important to monitor all aspects of girls' education in Afghanistan and their access to education, what is happening, what violations of human rights are happening, and what can be done. Because one of the biggest challenges that we are facing now is lack of accurate data from the ground. So it's important that the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan and UN Special Reporter on Human Rights in Afghanistan, they take into they put more focus on monitoring the human rights situation in the country and take into account the public reporting of human rights violations, and also continue to engage in dialogue with the Taliban for giving girls their full right to education in the country. It's also important that we continue our advocacy outside Afghanistan and raise the awareness of international community and people, and pressure these countries to take stance and take firm stance on girls' education. I don't think that recognizing the current regime will facilitate, or it will be a step towards ensuring human rights is not violated in Afghanistan, or for the development of the country, because again, coming to Chris Blackburn's question about how or why the international community believe that the Taliban has changed, and I would say that we should learn from our past mistakes and failures, and trusting a regime on the basis of the perception that we have. Perhaps there are certain groups that are less fundamental and moderate or liberal within this regime is another mistake that we are making. And in Afghanistan, in the past 40 years of war, we see that we put our trust on the fundamental groups because either they are portraying a picture to the international community that they are the actual representatives of the Afghan people, or they are showing a wrong perception of themselves. And this we can say the warlords that were involved very much in the previous government, two governments, Karzai and Ghani of Afghanistan, and the so-called leaders, and the current regime of the Taliban and any other extremist and fundamentalist groups that actually does not believe in human rights and equality and equity and justice for all citizens of Afghanistan, including women, ethnic minorities, girls, and so on. So it's very important that we don't make the same mistakes, and we should learn from our mistakes. And we should also know that when we say international community, what do we mean by international community? Do we also include the regional powers and the neighboring countries? Because from what we are seeing here, there is a dichotomy between the policies of our neighboring countries, regional powers, and the West when it comes to Afghanistan. And it's a very complicated and complex situation. We see that, as I said earlier, our neighboring countries, Iran and Pakistan, and Turkey recently, they are deporting Afghan refugees and asylum seekers, people who fear their lives and they are trying to seek refuge in these countries are being denied of their human rights. We also see countries like China that is trying to, last week, for example, the Chinese company, Beijing Nangarhar Construction Company, is trying to establish or build an industrial park in the Nangarhar province of Afghanistan. These kind of approaches makes us rethink about what do we mean by international community policies or strategy towards Afghanistan. Is there consensus between the international community, between our neighboring countries and regional powers, or not? And if not, how can we first of all build this consensus? People of Afghanistan are really tired of the ongoing 4 decades of war in Afghanistan. And this war is ongoing because when Taliban claim that they have brought peace and war is over, that is completely a false statement, because we can see from the daily blasts that happen in the mosques, in the educational centers, schools, targeting specific communities, ethnic groups, women. We can see from the abduction and targeted killings of previous special forces in Afghanistan or security forces in Afghanistan, human rights defenders, journalists, women, that Taliban claim that they are not involved in. So if all this is ongoing in Afghanistan, then how did we reach peace? And I think if we have a very surface level, narrow approach to Afghanistan, this is the result we will get, meaning that surface level and narrow approach will be to just try to solve instead of trying to solve the roots of the problem, we are trying to solve the uh, the problem in a very surface level with a very narrow approach. We're trying to, for example, right now, feed people. I'm not at all against that, because there is 23 million Afghans who are struggling with acute food insecurity and starvation, including millions of children. But are we really looking at the root causes of why we are where we are? So I think that is what is needed, and regional and international consensus needs to be built. And when it comes to internally, the issues that have, I think one of the main issues that led us to where we are is lack of unity among Afghan so-called leaders. In the previous government, we saw that there was a huge lack of unity, and this we saw during the peace negotiations, and this we saw among the government officials and among the so-called leaders, and this lack of unity resulted in where we are, because it gives the Taliban the opportunity to, with the support of the countries that are supporting them, to progress and capture power on 15th of August, when the Afghan military was much more well equipped and well trained. So building that consensus among the Afghan leaders is also important. For that, I think what we need to do moving forward is to organize an international conference where it should be outside Afghanistan. Taliban is trying to organize a grand assembly inside Afghanistan. I'm against that, because in a country where people are not allowed to express their opinions freely, they're living in fear. How can they participate in this grand assembly and share what they think and come up with a solution to the current crisis? So the conference needs to be outside Afghanistan, and it should be closely monitored by UN and all the regional and international countries involved in Afghanistan, including the so-called leaders from different ethnic groups, should participate to try to find a solution for the future of Afghanistan, which should include an election and establishing an inclusive government where women rights and human rights are fully respected. So I will stop there, and I might continue later.
Thank you very much, Hasina. We really got a very clear opinion from your side on the most important challenges that the Afghan people is confronted with. The fact that there are several regional powers that are not at all interested in the welfare of women, which we could also enlarge it to Russia, that actually very recently recognized the Taliban, gave the embassy to Taliban in Moscow, which is very telling on Russia's position and the way that we have to go forward. I would now pass the floor to Yalda of course, to answer all these questions. We are already winding up our webinar, but of course we can still come to one or other aspect. If you want to answer and also to give your opinion on the priorities for Afghan women, that would be fantastic.
Sure. I know time is short, but I would like to respond to some of the questions. Mr. Chris has said that why the world has believed Taliban. And that's what we have been calling in the last 5-6 years after the official and non-official negotiations started between Afghanistan and Taliban and United States. We kept calling that Taliban has not changed and they will never change. And you won't ever see a copy of this version of Taliban in any other country. So this is a question for us also, like why the global community had to believe in Taliban, that they have changed. Is there any project? Is there any game? Is there any deal? I am not a politician and I don't know that, but this is our own question as well. To your second question, I'm sure you have read the report that Daily Mail published some time ago, and that the girls or the daughters of some of the leaders of the Taliban are going to the best schools in Pakistan and in Qatar. So this restriction is only on the girls in Afghanistan, not on their own. Sohail Shaheen, who is the spokesperson of Taliban in Qatar, in Doha, her 3 girls are going to one of the best schools in Qatar. So will they rethink, even if we remind them about what they are allowing for themselves and putting restrictions for the other women in Afghanistan? Coming to questions of Mr. Wolf, I would start from your last question. Does the recognition of Taliban help? No. My answer is a clear no. Because right now the Taliban is taking hostage the education of the girls, the rights of women, the human rights, everything that Taliban has taken as hostage is because they want to put pressure with that on international community and get recognition. As soon as they are recognized, they will go worse than what they are. So you saw from the beginning, they were showing or acting a little moderate to prove to the world that they have changed. And once they found out that they are not going to get recognition, they are now showing their real faces. So this will continue. And the girls' education is important, but please, let's not forget that it could be a game or a kind of ransom that Taliban is asking instead of the recognition. In terms of clerics, we don't have any hopes in them because they are always busy with the rights of women, because they're always busy with objecting women and not on bigger issues and not on the country's economy, not on kind of the killings, the target killings, or the other crimes that Taliban are doing. Whatever they do is just to stop women from education, from everything. So this Mufti, we are very happy that he raised his voice, but these clerics will not be very helpful. If we do a little bit of advocacy, it may be helpful, but Taliban are making their decisions for their own, and I don't think anyone would have influence on them. In terms of what should be done, I just want to bring one thing to your attention. When the COVID-19 pandemic took over the world, all of the globe came together to fight it with it. Now that the Ukraine war is happening, almost all of the countries involved are working together and have a consensus on putting sanctions and whatever. But I don't know why when it comes to Afghanistan, everybody has their own agenda. As I said, while Afghan refugees are in exile and in third countries and are applying for visas, they are not being issued visas, but the Taliban leader, who is on the blacklist of the FBI and the international community, he comes to Norway on a private jet and in a luxurious hotel. So this is something that kind of raises the questions, what is happening. Now, what should be done is that when there was the peace deal between United States and the Taliban, every agreement has its kind of parts that you say, if you don't meet with the requirements of this agreement, this and that will happen to you. And those parts, those annexes of the Doha peace deal was always kept hidden from the public. So, can the international community talk to the United States to find out what were included in those annexes and what were those punishments that, if Taliban are not meeting the requirements, what should be done with them? This is something that international community could do together so that they could put pressure on the Taliban. So yeah, these are my answers to you. And I echo what Hasina Jan said. What is happening in Afghanistan right now with the women is devastating. And it's not happening anywhere in the world in any other Islamic country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yalda. I think that your voice was very powerful and your message was crystal clear. Transparency on the Doha deal. Absolutely. I think that all of us, we should know what was this deal. Actually, I was, in Tashkent in an international conference just a month before the Kabul takeover, and I did understand that there was really a very, very wide diplomatic communication that included China and Russia. To give the most obvious examples, and that those who pretend that they were so overwhelmed and so surprised with the Kabul takeover, they are not really telling the truth. That's something because I did realize, I mean, I did not realize before, but I did realize 15th of July, it was a matter of days, maximum weeks rather than months. And I don't think I have a special, intuition. It was quite obvious from the way that all the main interlocutors were positioning themselves. So it was arranged, and some transparency would certainly be very much welcome. Your plight to put Afghanistan exactly at the same league as Ukraine is absolutely fundamental as well. It is not minor, not less terrible for people in general and women in particular. What is happening in Afghanistan? I think it is a very, very good call, and that we should listen to it. And regarding the VIP treatment of the terrorists that are blacklisted in Oslo, in contrast with the way that Afghan women are being treated, I can only say I fully endorse your views, and it is absolutely shameful. And I think we have to do something about it. We have to raise our voices as much as we can, and we must keep Afghanistan, and in particular Afghanistan women, up in the agenda. Thank you so much for both of you, both our main speakers. Thank you, Dr. Wolf, for coming in with some comments and questions. Chris Blackburn, fantastic. I think that the Global Friends of Afghanistan are a very powerful tool to raise awareness in the world to the situation in Afghanistan. And to all of those who have been following us, thank you very much. We will produce the entire recording. It will be available soon in our website, SADF website. We will also make some comment on it. Both Yalda and Hasina, you are very much welcome to write for us if you have the time and if you have the opportunity. We will be very pleased to receive your contributions. And let's see if next time we will address Afghanistan, we will see already an answer from the international community that is not yet there. Thank you very much to all of you. Goodbye.